When parents today are trying to decide if it is finally time to get their child a mobile phone because they want to stay in constant contact and have a rough idea of where they are located, they usually think that they have two main options, and that is either to go for a classic smartphone or for a child's smartwatch. However, there is actually a third option that perhaps a lot of people do not know about, and that is a smartphone for children. It is suitable for those who are not completely comfortable with the idea that their child should already have a classic smartphone with all of its features, such as access to the internet, social networks, YouTube, and so on, and at the same time they might not really like smartwatches because they think that they are relatively large for a child's wrist, or they feel that the display, which the child always has on their hand, will be a distraction. Let us go ahead and look at the third option today, and that is the smartphone for children called the Garett One kit phone. I am Marketa, and I tested it with my children for several weeks, and today I will show you how it performed in the test. Before showing it, I'll mention it's designed to be very safe for kids. And even though the manufacturer presents it as a smartphone, do not imagine a smartphone in the true sense of the word, but that is exactly its advantage. It is a phone for children where, as a parent, you can influence who calls the child and also who the child is allowed to call. Furthermore, you manage all the applications and functions on that phone that the child has access to and that they can use. And at the same time, you have an overview of where your child is roughly located. I tested it with children at home, on vacation, and also at school. We managed to lose it at school on the first day. So we examined its location functions in detail, as well as all possible spy functions. And I will tell you more about that later in the video. The phone is sold in 3 color variants, in black, blue, and pink. Let us now show you what we find in the package when we open up the box. There is the phone itself, along with a protective cover in the color of the phone that you choose. And besides that, there is of course a cable for charging, a USB-C. For kids, there's a few stickers for decorating the phone. And last but not least, you will also find this practical neck strap, which we also immediately attach to the phone. And I must say that it is very nice because a small child does not always have pants that have pockets or a backpack to put the phone in. At the same time, the strap is very nice in case the child puts the phone down somewhere, and it is easier for you to find where it is in the room. We certainly welcome the fact that there is a protective cover inside the package. We had it on the phone for the entire duration of the testing. When I tried to remove it, like this, for me the phone is actually nicer in that protective cover. It is practical because it is protected against various falls, which of course will come with small children. I will just point out that when we were attaching the strap to the phone, it took us quite a bit of effort to get it into those little holes on the phone. Anyway, it can be solved by adding the strap only here to the protective cover. And what I would definitely recommend is to get some protective glass or film for the display of that phone. You can find them online for about 200 crowns. And if you were buying the phone, I would definitely recommend getting that glass, because after a few weeks of testing, for my taste, we have the display quite scratched up. You can see it here. The scratched display does not affect the phone's function, of course. It is more of an aesthetic matter. The phone is really small and light. We can compare it with the iPhone 17 model, for example, where you can compare it like this, the size, or also with those mentioned children's smartwatches. Here you see the display size. Big, the phone weighs 75 grams, which is, for an idea, the weight of a larger Snickers bar. And when I mention the size, it fits easily into a 6-year-old boy's pocket, with the fact that a little bit of the phone sticks out of the pocket. and that is exactly why we appreciated the mentioned neck strap. Let us take a closer look at the display and how the phone is controlled. When we turn it on, here we see the main screen of the phone, and by sliding like this, we get to the menu. The menu is completely simple. There are a few icons with clear names. The icons are large enough, so children have no problem orienting themselves or recognizing which icon means what. For an idea, when my 4-year-old daughter had the phone in her hand for the first time, after about 5 seconds, she played a song. So I think you do not have to worry that the children would not orient themselves or have a problem controlling the phone. Here is, for example, the contacts item, call logs, where there are some missed calls, dialed calls received. With this option, the child writes messages or can chat via the application with the parent. Here is the camera and features like alarm, calculator, games, or some special functions such as quizzes, audiobooks. We will talk about that later. What is also fair to say is that the touch on the phone's display is not as sensitive as we are used to with classic smartphones. If, for example, you normally control an iPhone where you just need to move your finger gently across the screen, then here you have to get used to that you simply have to press a little harder. And when I go back to the home screen, I will show you how a child can easily change, for example, the display wallpaper. I held my finger on the screen, and by sliding like this, they can choose some other image to set as the home screen. At the same time, they can put their own photo there, for example. Let's show it now. And when I get here into the gallery, pick a photo we have, then we set it simply. Go back and there's some photo loaded. For the phone to work properly, you need to get a SIM card with data because the device needs internet access so that all functions work correctly in it. You then insert the SIM card right here from the bottom of the phone. And as a parent, you will also need to download the Garett One application to your phone, which you will use to manage the device. The app is available for both iOS and Android and is in Czech. So that is certainly a major advantage of the Garett Kids phone. And furthermore, Garett is constantly developing and updating the app. If we take a look inside, you can see one page here where you can check the child's current location. Within the application, you also have access to a chat where you can talk or start a call, and then we have the management of all possible functions on the phone. As a first step, let's demonstrate how to add a contact to the child's phone. Open the contact directory here. You can see that we have a few contacts saved here, and we click Add Contact with the icon at the top. You select the name, the phone number, and you can also add the child's relationship to that contact. And you can also choose a photo for the contact. Either you choose an image from your photo gallery on the phone, or you take a picture directly. I think this is great because if you are buying the phone for a young child who cannot read well yet, we will show you how the child sees the contact in the phone, that the photo is displayed to them like this, and they can quickly choose who to call. As one of the first things we did in the app, we disabled the dialer, and when we open the phone icon has appeared here. When we click on it, the child sees the dial pad. When we turn it back off, we return to the screen, and you can see that the phone icon with the dial pad has vanished, which means that the child cannot dial any random numbers whether out of curiosity or by accident, and call them. However, this can also be done in reverse, which we also used immediately, so that unknown numbers cannot call the child's phone, and you can set this here in the app via the reject calls function. From unknown numbers, and here you can either confirm or reject it depending on how you want it. In the application, you can also set up SOS contacts. When we select this option, you can see that you can set 3 phone numbers and the child can call them without needing to find the contact in the directory or the contact list on the phone. We will demonstrate this. We return the phone to this state, and SOS calling is started by holding for about 3 seconds the button, and here we see that the phone is calling the contact. And if the phone does not connect to the first SOS contact after a short while, it will automatically begin dialing the second phone number, and then, after a short while, the third one as well. Here on the screen you can see that right after it already disappeared for me, but we have notifications here. You will also receive a notification that the child has initiated an SOS call. The notification goes to everyone with the app on their phone. As for communication, the phone handles both classic calls and video calls, SMS messages, but you can also send voice messages from it. We charged the phone or loaded the phone's SIM card with credit, and so we mainly used classic calls. And there I must say that even when my son called me from the car, everything was clearly audible and the quality was fine. Just keep in mind that the phone does not have vibration, so when you turn the volume down to the minimum, it may happen that the child easily misses the phone or the call. The child can also send classic SMS messages. Just count on the fact that it is tapping like on old mobile phones, button ones. When we select the message option here and click Write Message, the child then selects the contact to send an SMS to send. And here we write. We will write hello. We try to send. A message arrived on my phone. Message. When we reply to the child, we send it. Then to the phone, the child finds it in received messages. Just keep in mind that when you send the child a smiley like this, the message will arrive. But they will receive squares because the phone does not support these special characters and emojis. I will also add that if you want to have a bit more control over the messages the child receives, you can. And you set that again here in the application with the function of receiving SMS messages from the watch. When we choose it, you can allow the collection of SMS on the device, and at that moment, the messages that arrive on the child's phone arrive to you here. By the way, here, a function started that I want to talk about a little later, when it is possible to set on the phone that it turns off at a certain time. If you just want to text and call the child via data, that is of course possible too. We will turn on, or we will return to the Parental application. Here is the chat option, and we can try to send a message right away. Here, however, you can see that only voice messages can be sent. This is how we try to send a voice message, and the time is displayed here, from which you may have already concluded that the maximum length of that voice message is 15 seconds, which you can send to the child. When you release the button, the message reaches the child's phone. Here they have it in the item chat. and can play it. And when the child wants to answer the parent, they hold this microphone button again and record their message. Releasing. It sends it. And on the phone, you can see that the app announced the receipt of a new message. And when the child wants to answer the parent, they hold this microphone button again and record their message. There is one more option in the application for the chat, and that is sending some smileys here. But when we send a smiley, you can see on the child's phone that it does not appear there. That is a small, unpolished detail of that chat application. If other family members like grandparents want to communicate with the child via data, then they must also download the Garett One application to their phone. The phone allows tracking the child's approximate location. You can manage that again in your phone's application. And you can see the entire map on the screen and where the child is located. And then here in the device section, you can set how often the location should be updated. When we select that option, we can see here that we can set the phone's location to update every 10 minutes or every 20, 30, or 60 minutes. Simultaneously, if you would like to perform that update immediately, you can do so using this icon on the edge of the screen, and the phone's location will be displayed to you instantly without waiting for the update. Another possibility you can configure is whether the location is performed using GPS or through LBS positioning, which is, to put it simply, a different method of localization, which on one hand saves battery life, but it might not be as accurate. In our particular case, we always kept LBS disabled and utilized GPS for location. It is worth noting that the accuracy is not perfect. If you have had experience with smartwatches for kids and were not happy with the location tracking because it did not show the child's location perfectly, do not expect this child's phone to improve that. The principle of localization works basically the same, and the phone has the same antenna as those Garett children's smartwatches. In classic smartphones, the antenna is larger, and therefore the location is more accurate. Nevertheless, I must say that most of the time the location worked well, but I simply had some dropouts or bad notifications. If I were to give specific examples, for instance, when the phone was at our home, it usually shows that it is 2 houses away. When we were skiing somewhere in the mountains, sitting on a chairlift, the application showed us on the map that the phone was a few meters away from us on the slope. And when I was traveling by train, where there was logically a poor signal, the location was even more inaccurate. In the application, you can also set so-called geozones. These are locations where you feel the child can move safely and where you then want the phone to send you a notification when the child leaves that geozone, or on the contrary, when they re-enter it. To add a geozone, I'll go back so it's clearly visible here via the button plus, and we will start drawing. And it is set simply by drawing a circle like this. Then you click Save. We'll write Test as the geozone name. You can name each geozone. There can be several of them set up. And you turn on various options here. For example, if you want a notification when the child enters the geozone, or conversely, when they exit the geozone. To summarize, the location is a useful tool but you cannot rely on it 100%, and you should certainly not purchase a phone solely for this feature. However, this also applies to other similar devices. And now, finally, our actual crisis situation. When I first sent my son to school with the phone, he came back without the phone and we lost it. Our first reaction was to try to call the phone, but in the morning before leaving for school, we had turned the volume down to the minimum, so the phone did not ring anywhere, and because it does not vibrate, it had no way to alert us. The second step we tried to take was to take a photo remotely. This is a feature that you also configure in the Parent application. You will find it here in the device section, and there is an option for remote photography. However, our photo turned out like this because the phone was simply in a location where the camera was covered. So we logically saw nothing from that. The third step was that we turned on remote monitoring. This is a feature you can find here, and you essentially start remote eavesdropping on the phone. I have to admit that I don't really like these eavesdropping features, both in smartwatches for children and in phones, and I always thought I wouldn't use them, but life prepared a situation for us where I was forced to use it. Here you choose the phone that the child's phone is to call. When we confirm this, you can see that the application is contacting the child's phone and it, without you seeing anything, begins calling the phone number. The listening really helped us in this case. When I turned it on, I first heard one child talking in the phone, then a second, third, fourth, so I knew that the phone was in a group of children. And after a while, the teacher spoke, so I knew the phone was safe at school, and I determined which classroom it was in. But our story had a bit of a twist, because before I managed to get to the phone started moving. And it was precisely at this moment that the localization helped us, thanks to which we finally identified exactly the house where the phone had ended up, and we found the phone safely. It must be noted that this entire event occurred in an outlying part of the city, where there is a fairly dense area of family homes. Honestly, I do not know how our story would have ended if the phone had traveled to a housing estate or was riding somewhere on a train. So a happy ending probably wouldn't have happened. Let's show another useful function, and that is the Do Not Disturb mode, which is useful, for example, at school. You configure it again in the Parental mobile application here in the device section, and here is the Forbidden in Class option. When we open it, you can see here that you can set several times, during which the phone should switch to the mode where it cannot be used. Again, we can demonstrate it, specifically test it. It is 11:20, so we will set the time to 11:20. We'll set the end to 11:21. Set specific days and press save. And for a moment, we wait. I will add that you can see here that you can also name each mode specifically, for example, as the first lesson at school, second lesson, third, fourth, or if the child has some extracurricular activity, for example, playing an instrument, when the phone should also be silent. And within a short while, it should turn off for us. It is 11:20, and you can see on the phone that the Do Not Disturb mode has appeared. The child sees only the time, day, and date. They see the battery and signal, but they cannot get anywhere, for example, into the phone menu, and they basically cannot do anything with the phone at all. The only thing they can do is press the side SOS button again and call a parent. Also, it is true that while in Do Not Disturb mode, you will not be able to call them because the phone is simply unavailable. You can also turn off the phone remotely. You do this via the app by selecting the remote shutdown function here. The application will ask you if you really want to do that. And once you confirm, then in just a short moment, the phone will begin to shut down. It is important to note that you cannot turn the phone back on using the app. It will logically show on the screen that the device is offline and only the child or the person who currently has the phone can turn it on. Whoever happens to have the phone right now. If you also wanted to configure the phone to turn off at a certain time and turn back on later, that option is available here too. It is called scheduled power. And here you can already specifically set, for example, 11, 24 to 11:30, Monday to Friday, that it turns off at a specific time and then turns on. It lasted 3 to 5 days. For instance, when we were skiing, we had location tracking on every 10 minutes, and we also tried to update it manually every few moments. Besides that, we sent a message here and there, played a game, so the phone lasted 3 days. And when we just left it be so it would update its location every 10 minutes without us really using it, it lasted 5 days. The phone features an 800 mAh battery and charges using a USB-C cable found in the box. You plug it in here, like this, on the side, and charging from 0 to 100 takes 2 hours. And I will show you one more practical charging feature, which is the emergency power reserve that you can find in the app. That function means that you can set at what percentage of battery the phone switches to emergency mode. In practice, this means that just like you saw with Do Not Disturb mode, the child only sees the time screen and cannot do anything else with the phone. They cannot drain it by playing some games or taking pictures. Here you can select whether this function should be enabled and at what battery percentage it should trigger. When we had this function set to 15% and the phone switched to that power saving mode, it lasted another 18 hours, which is great. To be interesting for kids, it has several entertainment features. A camera is standard. The Garett One kit has both front and rear cameras, both with 0.3 megapixels, so the quality is really quite basic. But in my experience, I can say that children do not mind at all. They are just happy to have a camera to be able to snap one photo after another and to take pictures of whatever they like. We will show you where that camera on the phone is. Here I got into the menu. We have the camera icon here. And this is how we turn it on, and we can easily switch between the rear and front camera. Another function that children have here in connection with the camera is the magic camera function here. And in it, the child selects an icon like this. You can see that there are some crowns. Let us see what else is here. Such simple icons with the help of which children can spice up their photography, and they enjoy it. When the child takes a picture, let us take one quickly, save it to the phone, then a sharing icon will appear. Photo sharing was successful, and on the parent's mobile phone, a notification will appear that the child has shared a photo. And I will show where to find it. And that is here in that remote photography where we were even before because of spying. So here it shows the resulting photo, which we can delete, and when we do, we see what happens. In the phone gallery of the child of that photo, the photo remained. Here is just such a detail. For photos, only the month and year of taking are listed. It is not there exactly by date. Children will also find an MP3 player in the phone. They can access it here again. In the menu, there is a sound icon. And here you see that there are a few songs recorded there. Children can add more to the phone, and they can also listen to music via Bluetooth headphones. Besides that, they can record some of their own sound here via the recorder, or for example, quickly when they hear some song on the radio, then they can record it into the phone. So simply, and it will appear to them again here in that list of those tracks. The phone has 16 gigabytes of memory into which both recorded videos, photos, or that music are saved, and it is good to know that you cannot expand that memory with an SD card. In the menu, kids find games. They will find some 15 games here. We can look, there is like that simple classic style HUD. When we go back here, for example, we can show Gold Digger, Tetris, some math game, and 2048 and others. Among the games, there is also flag guessing. In my opinion, it is somewhat unfinished because the names of those flags are, or those countries are, in the English language, so the child must know. First, they must read, and the second thing is that they must know how the country is called in English, so it will be an opportunity to learn it, or it will be done with the help of an adult. What is a plus for me about those games is that they are not addictive, which as a parent I only appreciate. These are games that entertain children. For example, when we were flying somewhere in a plane, riding in a car, they turn them on out of boredom. But when the phone is already lying at home on the kitchen counter, it has been there for a month, then they do not have the tendency to pick up the phone and play those games. The phone has, besides games, some other educational apps. When we select the education icon here, for example, we choose animals. Then here like this, the child learn, for example, English names of animals. Besides animals, there are also means of transport, food, shapes, and more. Another of those educational applications is here, this one, where the child can go through some daily habits in English. Also, there are audiobooks. They are also in English. Again, we will try to play one. And we have a time teacher, where a child can learn to tell time. Here we see the digital ones, and here are classic analog ones, and when it's 12, it tells us the time in English. The phone has other practical features for daily use. One is the alarm. You manage and set that up again in the Parental application. Let us show you where. Back to device section. Here is the alarm tab, and we can set several alarms for the child's phone. We do it simply right there via the plus icon. We set the time here. We can add an alarm name, confirm, and save. Here we manage whether that alarm is currently turned on or not. And when we look into the phone child's, we find the alarm there. Here, we confirm it. You see the child sees what alarms the parent has set in that application. And here it also shows which alarm is currently turned on and set. However, The child cannot do anything with those alarms, so they have no option. For instance, if they didn't like it, that they don't want to get up tomorrow morning. So the child cannot cancel the alarm here by themselves. And in the meantime, the alarm rings. The fact that the child cannot manage the alarms themselves can be an advantage. For example, when they are at grandma's or somewhere else for babysitting and you need to check and verify that they will wake up in the morning just as they should. On the other hand, if you want to transfer a little bit of responsibility to the child so they can handle this themselves, it can be a bit limiting. But that can be bypassed. We'll show you how. When we turn on the child's phone, we go back to the menu. Then, in the menu, we find the habit tracking app here. And here we have options like some homework, reading time, going to bed, waking up. And the app's task is to remind the child of some daily activities. But it works basically like an alarm clock. Either you turn it on here simply with a button or turn it off. You set the time when the phone should remind you, and then also the repetition, whether it should happen once, whether it should alert you every single day, or you want your own settings for only some days. The phone also has a practical flashlight. We can show it to you. Like this. I'll shine it on you. And besides that, the child also has a simple pedometer in it, where they can track how many steps they walked that day. Here I will add that it is really a simple function where no history is recorded. So the child can no longer track it historically. And likewise in the Parents app here in the health plan, we have steps, and here the number of steps that is in the phone is displayed. The number of steps there is different now because I was showing it to you on the blue phone, but we can verify it when we turn on the steps here, or on the black one, that the numbers match. Now let's say the pros and cons of the children's phone from Garett. The advantage is definitely, in my opinion, that the phone is safe for children. As a parent, you manage who the child calls, or conversely, who can call. You don't give the child direct access to the internet, to YouTube, to various social networks, and so on. The phone is simple, light, small, so it is absolutely ideal for small children. The battery life is, in my opinion, absolutely great. Just the fact that you don't have to charge it every day and that there are such functions, like limiting the use of the phone, for example, when it is running out of power or when the child is at school. I also like the Parental app, which is in Czech, the possibility to track the approximate location of the child, and that the entertainment on the phone is not addictive for children. The price-performance ratio seems completely fine to me. The phone can be bought for a price of around 2,000, and that seems reasonable to me. On the other hand, there are also cons. One of them is that the display is easier to scratch. It is that finger movement on the display isn't that smooth. Furthermore, it can be a barrier for someone that the phone does not accept some special characters such as emojis and so on. Then there is the localization, which is not always completely accurate. Therefore, if you are looking for a device only or primarily to track where the child is, then I would not recommend it. Another disadvantage can be some unfinished translations in the app, when some names are perhaps inaccurate, or perhaps they remain in English. However, that is something the manufacturer can fix with an update. And for example, I myself sent a list of things to Garett after the test. That would be nice to improve. And likewise, we will see the localization. Maybe Garett will improve it with the next update. Garett One Kid phone is certainly suitable for parents who want to buy a phone for their children, but do not want to buy a classic smartphone with access to the internet, YouTube, social networks, and so on yet. It is suitable for children roughly from 5 to 10 years old, so typically children who are, for example, in primary school. It is a good choice for parents who want to stay in contact with the child and at the same time want to know at least approximately where the child is. But let's be honest, if the child is already used to having a classic smartphone at home that they use and play on, they might be disappointed. And likewise, there could be disappointment if they already have several classmates who go to school with a classic smartphone. Garett One Kid is intentionally simpler, and that can be the advantage for those parents. It cannot honestly compete with a classic smartphone, but it doesn't even try to. If you are deciding whether to buy a smartwatch for your children or a children's phone, then each solution naturally has its advantages. With a children's smartwatch, the advantage is that the child has the watch on their hand all the time, and it is harder for them to lose it. At the same time, this can be a disadvantage because the child has the display on their wrist. They may have a constant tendency to tap on it and look for something on the watch. On the other hand, a smartphone is nice in that the child can store the phone in their school bag and only takes it out when you need it. At the same time, it is also an advantage that the display of the phone is larger. Well, and for some children, it can also act as an advantage that you don't fob them off with a children's smartwatch, but they get their first adult-like phone. Now, what is your opinion? Please let us know in the comments how you feel about the Garett smartphone for children, whether you would pick it or if you prefer kids' smartwatches. If you liked the video, I would be very happy if you gave us a like or even a subscription. And thanks for watching until here. See you in the next video. Bye.